Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Managing editor Brenden Slaughter, joined as always by recruiting analyst Jared Halus, and our special guest this week, Beaver's Edge Damboard premium subscriber Callie B, joining us from what looks like a very sunny location. How you doing there, Callie? Good to see you, and I'm jealous of that short sleeve tee, my friend.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's been about 95 this week, so we've gotten the October heat wave now. It's like October is one of the hottest months of the year now. It's weird.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
What are you guys at, Brenden?
We're starting to get pretty cold up here now. We're getting into like the 60s during the day and getting down to about 40 at night, though. 40 or colder at night, and that's where it's getting to be. You know, when I warm my car up in the morning, as you know, I'm a morning person. I get up really early, and it's a little cold in the morning, but that's fall football, baby. That's exactly what just reminds you of everything. And when I see the leaves change and the colors change, everything up here, it just kind of reminds me that Beaver football is right around the corner, and now it's not even right around the corner because it's here, and they're working towards it right now. We are one whole week into fall camp. First scrimmage coming up tomorrow as we're recording this on a Friday. That first scrimmage will be Saturday. We'll be looking to speak to the coaching staff and players this next week to get their reaction. But I'm just kind of curious from you, Callie, from what we've had this week, what most excites you about what you've seen in the restart from the Beavs?
Yeah, I'm honestly really pumped about what I'm hearing with the secondary. Obviously, I think I feel like that's going to be really one of the strongest areas for us this year, other than linebacker, which I think speaks for itself. I think just the competition with the JC guys and all those guys, like. I don't know if you guys watched Last Chance U at all, but like Ray Wright, like that swag that he brings, I think is something that I think Coach Blue was talking about with Jay and Grant, like that you need, and like he has that in abundance. So I feel like there's ways, in a team dynamic where like even if you're not on the field, like that contribution and just that swag and competitiveness level that gets added in practice and and all the drills and things like that, like. That makes you a lot sharper. And I feel like that's like kind of a component that we've been missing for a while, for a really long time actually on the defense. And I think that's going to be something that's really evident this year. I also saw the nugget about James Rawls looking pretty good on the line. So I thought that was really good. He's actually, his JC is like literally 10 minutes away from where I'm at now. I'm in Brea. He played at Fullerton. So I saw him a couple times and he was, like I think I posted about it. Like he was really explosive for a big dude, and so I thought that was a good nugget to hear that he is making some noise because to me he has a chance to maybe play inside and then give us a little bit of more juice and athleticism from the inside, which I think is what we've been missing. So I'm looking forward to those two things, and then obviously we'll see what shakes out at receiver, like who emerges there. That's going to be an interesting thing. So I know Brandon will be keeping us in the loop there. So I'll be looking forward to seeing how that progresses too. I think there's a lot of guys like Beeson's really interesting. Obviously, everyone's looking for Tyjon Lindsey to hopefully take a leap this year. And then I think the one thing known quantity is really Bradford, right? So it's really who emerges as kind of that number 1A or 2 or 3 guy after him. I think that's the big thing we're all looking for,
Certainly, and you kind of touched on a couple good points there, and I would have to say I agree with you. I mean, going back, like the most recent defensive back, right? It's almost like Oregon State's been missing those defensive backs that just have that swagger, right? You can go back to guys like Jordan Poyer, Alafalava. We see Steve Nelson still balling it up in the NFL with the Steelers right now, and then it just kind of stopped there for a while, and you know that
we'd be remiss. Like my really good boy all during OSU years was Dennis Weathersby. So like he
certainly
like super quiet dude, like in real life, but on the field, like he brought that swag too. So it's like you need DBs like that. Like that's how they have to be built. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing from Coach Blue. Even just in our early conversations this week, we got a chance to talk to 2 defensive backs, and David Morris and Jaden Grant, who both guys now have played a lot of ball. Those guys are experienced. They're veterans. And, I think now, like just talking to them, they know that they got guys behind them that want to play. Yeah. And looking at guys like Alton Julian, I'm looking at guys like Ray Wright. I'm looking at someone like Ron Hardage III also, has made some moves. And then even Jonathan Riley up at that safety position from last year as well.
Yeah.
Competition breeds success, and those guys are determined. I mean,
Exactly.
they're all pretty naturally fun-loving, happy-go-lucky guys. Talking to them this week, those guys were zeroed in. I mean, it's like I said in the story that I wrote today, the defense is wanting to play with the chip on his shoulder this year. The defense knows they left a lot out there last year, and I think that should excite Beaver fans a lot. Just knowing for the fact that they want to bring that energy, and they know now, and they have the potential and the depth and the talent to actually get it done.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Just that's been the missing ingredient. So I'm excited for this season, just to see that kind of that shift happen. Because I think Coach Smith gets it, right? He was a part of that whole thing, so he realizes you need that edge, and so I think that's kind of the DNA. It looks like he's trying to instill on that defense, which is going to be fun to watch.
Certainly. And Jared, I'm curious from your perspective. Obviously, you got a story up this week talking about those JC defensive backs and, how Coach Smith has already, really seen what he's liked. And, everyone's been mentioned, but the guy that really seems to get mentioned more than others is Alton Julian. And I'm curious to know about Alton Julian, Jared. What impressed you most about him, or what impressed you most about him on the recruiting trail when the Beavers were picking him up, and how do you think he was able to pick up Tibbs' system so quickly?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you have those JUCO guys, they're a little more seasoned because, for the last two, depending on how long they've been in junior college, for the last however many years, they've been absolutely busting tail, just trying to perfect their craft and really hone in. And at that level, that's really what you're doing. It's strictly for development. Everybody goes in there with a goal, and that's to make it to the next level. So those coaches are just pouring everything into those kids. So they certainly have an edge, I would say, over, like a senior in high school coming into the system, just because they've had that experience. They've had a couple of years just to really dive in, to their craft. So it's not been too surprising. He played really well at CSM, City College of San Mateo, and that's a really good program as well. Great coaches over there. So it hasn't been super surprising to see him pick it up. And, I mean, you guys have mentioned, Raison Wright and all those guys as well. And it's just, like I said in the story, you kind of knew it was coming. And like Callie mentioned as well, they kind of have a little bit of that swagger and the attitude that a DB has to have. So it's really cool to see. And, I mean, obviously, like you said, it kind of, even if they don't see the time on the field right away, the guys who are ahead of them have to play with that chip, knowing that if they do something wrong, there's a willing, ready, and able guy right behind them ready to go. So it's cool to see.
And maybe for the first time in a couple years, I mean, Cal, even maybe more than that. I mean, Jared, you've only been around for, a couple years now, but Callie, I mean, just going back, when was the last time that you can remember that the Beavers had this much secondary depth where the guy behind the starter might be able to at least, hold his own compared to, dare I say, 2015, 2016, 2017, where you take the starter out of there, or someone like Isaiah Dunn is hurt. I mean, up until this last year, he struggled with injury. And when he left the field, that secondary was putting, Sean Wilson at corner, who, was more suited to a nickel than a corner or even and
safety, right? Yeah.
Right. And that's just, it wasn't going to get the job done. I think I can go back to a certain moment and a certain game, and I think back to Jonathan Smith's first year when the Beavers played Stanford, and Kobe Parkinson, tight end, who now is in the NFL, just went wild. And Oregon State had no one in the secondary that could cover him. And all I can remember Tim Tibesar saying in the practice after, or the availabilities afterwards, was, we need to get bigger and taller at corner. And what have they done the last 2 years? Yeah. They've crushed it in that recruiting game. And like you said, Jared, that instant experience right away. Guys that, sure, there may be a learning curve to learning the system, the speed of, Power 5 compared to JC.
Right.
But compared to school, that's huge.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I mean, just kind of adding to your point a little bit, there's just so much size now. And you can tell there's a prototype, and not only at the defensive back position, but across the board. I mean, the two, I talk about it all the time. They added 3 offensive linemen in the 2020 class. Well, 4 if you consider Sorensen. from Portland State, and they're all just big. They're big guys, and that's the prototype that they're looking for. And it's what you need at this point in college football to win. And they're confident in their coaching and development abilities. So if you can go out there and find a guy with the ideal size, maybe a little bit raw, but knowing that you'll have a little bit of time to coach them up and get them ready. I mean, that's why you're seeing these players turn into such great players, because they have the things that you can't coach. And then they come in and they're coached up to be able to use those intangibles to their best ability.
Yeah. And I think what I love, and Brenden knows this, like I'm definitely more the critical type of fan, and I'm that way with everything. Lakers just won a championship. I was like, if you would have talked to me a week ago, you would have thought we had already been bounced out of the playoffs, right? But like that's just how I am. I look at things critically, except for with my kids, they get a pass. But you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I think what it is and what I'm seeing that I really, really like is you can tell that there's a plan in place just in the recruiting philosophy. Like every recruit, every position, D-line still, I got some concerns. Everywhere else, you can see a clearly thought out and defined plan. They're going for a certain type of athlete, certain like physical makeup, right? Physical traits, and then the intangibles that we've been talking about are clearly being recruited. The DBs, like feisty, tough, got that swag. Like they're going to have that, hey, you're not going to beat me. And even if you do, like, you're not going to break my spirit if you do beat me. I'm coming right back at you.
Right.
Like that's the type of kid that they're recruiting. So that's what I like seeing. And that's what I wasn't seeing with the previous regime, is it was like everything was across the board. Like this kid is completely different than this kid. They were just essentially taking whoever they could get in a lot of ways, because they weren't able to necessarily hit on their primary target. So maybe they had a plan in place, but they weren't able to fulfill on that. Now I think you see the whole board is filled with kids that kind of fit the mold. And so even when they aren't getting option A, like option B, like you see him and you're like, okay, he's cool. Like he still fits the mold of what they want. So there's clearly a plan in place that's being executed, so far, I think really well. And so that's what I like about, the Coach Smith era so far.
I think that's really well described, Kelly. I mean, just as far as, breaking it down. But I'm curious, one thing that you said and mentioned there, the defensive line. And I'd be inclined to agree with you a little bit. And Jared, I kind of want to cue you in here. Outside of Omarion, who's coming in this next class, who's been that marquee defensive lineman that Jonathan Smith has landed? And Coach Leahy, obviously. I could throw Jordan Whitley in there, right? Yeah. When he came over, he was and maybe also want to throw in, Tavis Shippen this last recruiting class, as he was a very nice piece. But we haven't seen him. I'm talking before, instantly right now. And maybe that's where they needed simply to prove themselves as a coaching staff. Maybe that was the, every coaching staff, they're not flawless at every single recruiting position. Maybe Oregon State's defensive line was the one they were going to have to work a little bit harder to get those kids to Corvallis, or take the creative way they tried to. I'm absolutely going to draw a blank on his name, Jared. I need your help. The Auburn defense, Charles Moore.
Oh, Charles Moore, yeah.
Didn't work out, obviously, at Oregon State, but a swing for the fences, though.
Right. Well, what did I text you? What did I text you when they landed him?
This kid told me that day, he goes, I don't think it's going to last.
Oh, really?
And
yeah.
It's one of those toxic relationships, like where you see your buddy and his girl, like, just smashing glasses in each other's face, and you're like, yeah, this is like 2 weeks max.
Right. He's a great, he's a super talent, but I mean, the reason that it didn't work out at Auburn, and then he comes and he wasn't there for maybe half a year. You probably can see why without me. Verbal.
Some guys are just a little different.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Maybe it would be better suited to take that JUCO route, because they get really disciplined out there. Mm-hmm. You never know, but to just add into y'all's point, there has been, some, I guess, questions about the defensive line recruiting, and it's hard to say. I think if you're going to, I think that was what I was getting at. It's still early, and I think this year is where you really will kind of start looking and hoping to see some development at that position from some guys that they've been able to land in. They've talked well about Lolo Hayes so far, so you have to hope that one will play out. Even if it's not this year, which it probably won't be. But if it's in, year two, or one if he is to redshirt, which everybody will be able to, and, at that point, you're looking pretty good. And O'Marion, he's got a good build. Obviously,
nice.
great offer sheet and some high praise from some people, around the scene. So that's a good lane there, really good lane there. And you just they could have gone for more guys, but as we all know and as we've said a million times, this class just doesn't allow it.
No.
We may see moving forward, maybe next year, 2022, that will be a position that they really try to hone in on. It'll be interesting. In
case you're just joining us here on the Edge podcast, managing editor Brenden Slaughter, joined by recruiting analyst Jared Halus, and our special guest this week, Damn Board subscriber Callie Beeve, joining us again from a very sunny location. I continue to be jealous as I look at his picture throughout the recording of this podcast. Callie, just before we kind of move into our next thing, what are you kind of most looking forward? You've read the practice reports this week, kind of read all that stuff. As the fan that you are, what are you kind of most curious to see that comes out of the scrimmage? Is it maybe narrowing down that quarterback focus? Jonathan Smith said earlier this week, everybody from Tristan Gebbia to Nick Moore is taking reps. Is it seeing the receivers kind of get together? Is it hearing the lines are doing better? Yep. What are you looking forward to hearing, even though, unfortunately, we can't be there in person?
Yeah. For me, it's really two main areas. We touched on the D-line. I think just seeing who like you said, like you guys won't be there. So just hearing the recaps and seeing like who performed well there. One of the kids I was really kind of hopeful for is a SoCal kid from Mater Dei was Evan Bennett. But I don't know. You kind of don't hear his name mentioned like right off the bat. So it'd be good to hear him take a jump because he's obviously got some of the size we need inside.
Right.
So I think, just hearing how that D-line's doing, hopefully not getting pushed around, because I feel like that right now is really the kind of the weakest link on D. So if they can just hold their own and find someone to create a push and, free up those backers, then our D is going to be really, really solid. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I think you touched on it and we talked about it a little bit. It's really who emerges at receiver, at wideout. I think there's a lot of guys who we would describe as talented but unproven. And so who's kind of, positioning themselves to step up into that limelight, Lindsey, I think, is a guy, this is a big kind of, put up year for him. And then Irish is a kid who I thought his film was just like ridiculous. So seeing like where he takes it, and then I know I think Brenden, you touched on it. Like Beeson's been drawing rave reviews already. So and seems like he's pretty much ready made from a size perspective. So how quick can he adjust and make and take a jump? And then there's Champ, who I feel like everybody kind of always overlooks. But
get Moss.
That kid's got heart. Exactly. Yeah, his heart's immeasurable, right? So like what's he look like this year? So I think those are the two big things I'm looking to see.
Right. And a couple things just off what you mentioned. I'm curious to see how much, because the receiving core, I'm not going to say it would change completely, but it would have a different shake on it if Trayshawn Harrison is declared eligible this year.
Right.
And Smith said it again today. I couldn't, he was like, Smith is like a sphinx, right? You just can't read him when he's talking about, some of those finer details. And, just to put my opinion out there, in this year and this climate, in my opinion, there should be no reason the NCAA is telling anybody anything as far as what they can or can't do. But again, people with much bigger decision power to make than I. But I'm just, as I see that his status at receiver could be interesting, and then just for further depth at running back, Trey Lowe obviously as well. Both those guys, we only got to watch, 3 spring practices, but I was able to identify both of those guys in the first couple days because, they were so impactful right out the gate. And, I think back to those guys, Rawls is one of them. Going back through my notes back to spring, and those same guys that were making strides in those 3 days are the guys that coaches are still talking about now. So, even Zariah and Ben Gilbert were going off in those first couple days.
I remember reading that,
Yeah, and then here we have today Jonathan saying if he keeps playing the way he's going to play, Zariah is going to be a big part of our offense this year.
Wow, that's awesome.
I mean, that's a good thing to hear. And, Jonathan today is, continues to say that it's not just his, on the field skills, but his ability to pick up a playbook and knowledge and be kind of one of the few guys with size. And I think that's going to be beneficial that the Beavers just have so many different weapons, whether it's on defense at linebacker, whether it's receiver. There are some holes. I said both lines are still a little bit of a concern to me, but for the most part, the skill positions on both sides of the ball, this is as confident as I've felt covering an Oregon State team and their ability to have success, and maybe ever.
Wow, that's
I mean,
awesome.
I've been on the beat since 2014, and I think
Yeah.
that's an assumption.
2013 was a good year, but after that, it's been tough sledding.
Zariah is one of those kids where you could just you almost could just tell it was coming, especially when you saw that he was early enrolling. Oh yeah.
I was going to say
well,
the fact
and a legit
I was going to say
LSU
when
offer too. That's always a good sign the way they were rolling, right? So I think that's always like if he was going to be able to make hopefully the 2 deep there, like that's showing you something about a kid too.
Sure.
So, especially
Absolutely.
a receiver at LSU, like
No doubt.
Does here's a crazy conspiracy. Was Zariah just motivated coming in as a 3-star instead of a 4-star, Jared?
Well, hey,
wow.
if it was up to me, he would have been up. But maybe so. Maybe he felt like he had something to prove. You look at his offer sheet, and you're like, that alone could warrant restart.
Yeah. And again, I feel like his recruitment was kind of quiet. He went to a school tucked up in the Pacific Northwest. I think he could have been a 4. That's
very
just
well.
Right, and that's where I'm like, this guy was a guy that from the moment that he got in touch with Brandon Cooks, right?
Oh,
and Brandon Cooks was like, go break all my records.
Yeah.
When I saw those two getting in touch, I go, the one thing that always stuck out to me about Brandon Cooks is from when that kid got there as a freshman, he said, exactly, all business all the time. And that's why, the guy's still, I think top 10 paid receiver in the league this year. He was business from the day he got there. And if indications are, striking from practice on Beeson, exactly the same.
There you go.
I mean, Beaver fans got to be excited for that.
Yeah, Cookie's probably still in his ear. Like, here's go in, hit it hard. Day one. So that's a good call, Brendan. Like, you're probably seeing a lot of that manifest from that conversation, assuming they still have a relationship.
Yeah,
certainly, and I think they do. Just as far as him wanting to go over there, I think it was not just because obviously Cook's from California, Zariah from Texas. I'm not exactly sure how they got linked up. I'd have to go back and be able to look into it a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, they've had some exchanges. I'm sure they're close, and I've said this to Jared in past podcasts. The more that Brandon Cooks and Jordan Poyer, even now, more than those guys can continue to have exposure in the league and get more guys. I mean, seeing Nall, the more that can break through, that just helps you in living rooms. I mean, when you can, and now even Hodgins, when you can go into a living room and say, hey, we're just building the program, right? We need to make a bowl game. And this guy went to the league, right? That's things that kids want to hear about, in those living rooms. And Jared, I'm kind of just curious to get your perspective just on Zariah, really honing in to a pro beef, having a pro beef kind of channel him this way a little bit and see a lot of that same potential and really grow that, recruit, maybe, NFL player connection. I think that's a really unique thing for the program.
Yeah, no, you need it. And you see a lot of coaching staffs have to kind of dig for that. They have to get in touch with the players. So it kind of speaks to the culture a little bit. Of course, that was a different staff when Cooks was in there. But even better, that he's embracing and advocating for this staff without even having played for them or anything like that. It just goes to show that even from the outside perspective looking in, he knows that there's good things going on, and it helped.
The love there is. Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I had a really good story. So Cooks was on the Rams the past 2 years, and so their training camp's down here in Irvine. So I'm a big Rams fan, obviously a big Beaver fan. So I take my boys out there. I have 2 little boys, and so I wear Mama Ram stuff, but I put them in their Beaver gear, right?
Oh, that's
and
cool.
So the camps, they're pretty lax. Like the kids are running around, and so I had my boys kind of up just chilling, and B Cooks came over and was like, "Oh, State," and got a picture with them and said what's up to him. You know what I mean? So the love is still there, and obviously Mannion and Hecker were there. We're on the Rams. Well, Hecker still is, but Mannion's not. But Mannion was on the Rams then too. So all the guys came over and said what's up to my boys and stuff like that. So the love that still that the guys still have for for Oregon State and Corvallis is still it still carries them. He picked us out. We weren't right there. And he saw my boys and just kind of ran over to him really quick. So it was really cool.
And that's about living rooms.
Yeah.
And, helping on the recruiting trail, that's a big reason why they landed Jimmy Valsa. He said it to me. I saw that they just put Isaiah Hodgins in the league, who's a guy that I would love to compare myself to. And that's kind of, what they sold to him. Like you were saying, we didn't even win a bowl, or we didn't even go to a bowl game, but here we are putting players in the league. Just imagine what we can do when you get here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It works. And obviously it works. And they've been able to land some good guys. I mean, we talk about Beeson's offer list and everything, but Jimmy's was pretty dang good too. I think it was or top 8, whatever it was. Impressive. And there were some Texas schools on there. So
right.
Him all the way up to Oregon, it's good. And I think a lot of those kids, I know in Jariah's case as well, it's just the attraction, especially at receiver. Pac-12 with it, the ball thrown to you a lot. I've seen a lot of kids say that. So it's there's certainly a lot of things going for them in that regard. And I think you're seeing it pay off for sure because the staff's selling it really well.
I think it's just exciting for the fact that, we're starting to see Smith's vision, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Callie, just kind of like the clear blueprint start to pay off so quickly. I mean, not to, you don't want to obviously get ahead of yourself, but you just look back at, I don't want to put lipstick on a pig. This was one of the, if I'm going to say top 5 toughest job in Power 5 when Jonathan Smith came in here. I mean, people make the claim that, Mike Riley left the cupboard bare for Gary Anderson. Well, then Gary Anderson tore the foundation off the cupboard, and then there was really nothing there.
Oh, yeah.
So,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, as far as, like, what he had to work with, I mean, I think there was that first year of Jonathan, I think Oregon State had about 3 scholarship defensive linemen. So it's still improving from 2018. But, again, a really tough, yet unlike, past coaches, and, this goes all the way back throughout Oregon State's history, not just recently, coaches that have, gotten really hung up in what you can't get to Corvallis or what you can't do in Corvallis. The successful ones, Erickson, Riley, and again, now Smith is what I believe is there. You use Corvallis to your advantage, right? Exactly. And you just identify a certain type of player, kid, and recruit that wants to come there. And maybe it's a diamond in the rough, but they exist. If you can win at Washington State, you can win at Oregon State. If you can win, just about anywhere, it's possible. Oregon State still has Power 5 resources, has a very nice locker room, nice training facility. They have a stadium upgrade on the way, and a coach that's up and coming, and I just think the hype right now is big. And, I don't know if it necessarily plays into it, Jared, but you mentioned any guys that maybe want to come here when the ball's being thrown through the air. That's Coach Lindgren and the system that he's built. And let us not all forget that Edwards tried his best to poach him this past offseason and pay up. And luckily, I think for everybody's sake, they were able to hand out those contract extensions before the athletic department kind of got a little
pump the brakes.
I got a little in the wake of this year, so I think that's all important. But I think more than ever, it's just to wrap up this point, seeing Smith's vision, and Jared and I see it all the time with the recruits. Hearing from our people around the program and those people that are connected to the recruiting world. Oregon State's making an imprint. They're making an impression. People are starting to know who they are. Even on a national scale, and I say that. Not hesitantly anymore with, the fact that they got Jimmy Valson and got Zariah Beeson. A couple guys had Texas, and, they're expanding their reach. I think the best times are certainly yet ahead. And if I'm a Beaver fan, this is as optimistic as I've been in a long time. And, I'm sure you probably feel that way, even though, like you said, you always kind of look at things with a real, critical lens there, Callie.
Yeah, I do. And I think that's what has me excited. Like, I'm typically always critical, but this season, the fact that it got delayed, I think was a bummer. But like this season, I've been like, okay, this is the year where I think it's like, potential bowl game, and if a few things break well, like who knows, like I'm really pumped up for this year for sure.
And just to go ahead and transition to our next point, just if you're just joining us here on the Edge podcast, managing editor Brenden Slaughter Recruiting Analyst Jared Halus, and our special guest this week, Oregon State Damn Board subscriber, Callie Beeve, joining us. Jared, I'm kind of curious, you kind of had a topic that you wanted to touch on as far as immediate eligibility goes. I'll kind of yield to you just to kind of for this segment and kind of let you take the floor.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard yet, it's pretty big news as of right now. The NCAA is looking to be passing a bill that's going to allow a one-time transfer without any restrictions whatsoever. So obviously, I think it's beneficial for Oregon State more than anything. You've seen them have a lot of success with their staff already, bringing in really high-quality guys through the portal. What I worry about, I mean, I do have some concerns. I would hate for it to become a thing where, let's say, a kid goes to playing at Murray State and he's just balling out. Like, what's going to prevent Kansas or something like that from being like, all right, come on over, and who's going to turn that down? That's what my concern is, and I think that could really lead to the monopolization of
the wild dude.
Yeah. I think that part of it would suck.
It could get scary for sure, and I hope that doesn't happen. But I guess we'll just have to see. It looks like it's definitely going to be passed. So like I said, I mean, there's going to be some good things that come out of it, but it could get scary as well. I don't want Alabama to poach every good player in the South. And I don't want
exactly.
I mean, even schools that haven't been good per se in recent years, like USC. I mean,
could get better overnight.
Right.
Yes, it's like that, simply because they have that pool and they can get anybody they want because you can transfer there without any restriction. So it could get scary, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing, Jared, and again, I don't like to necessarily go down this line of questioning, but we are in college football, and the thing that worries me is that there will at least be a handful of teams that don't play by those rules, and maybe, I think the door. Why again? Given the situation, and I mentioned earlier this podcast, I am all in favor of doing what's best for the kid as far as their career, their college playing career, what's going on, with their home life, anything else. This year, it's weird, and everyone kind of deserves a pass with what they want to do. But long term, I just think this could open the floodgates for the richest schools to be able to have opportunities to, in essence, funnel the best talent year in and year out, even if they're having to move schools. And again,
I think that part,
again, could it happen? Maybe not, but it's not like every program's clean in the country. I mean, we'd be lying to ourselves if we said we were, because the NCAA self-imposes teams, and teams get banned from postseasons and lose scholarships all the time. So, I think, like you were saying, Jared, it could kind of open the door, but at the same token, you kind of have to right now because everyone's situations are kind of really just kind of going haywire. No one knows what to do with scholarship numbers right now. There's not a lot of clarity in that arena. Nobody really knows who's going to accept the blanket waiver and come back next year as opposed to just go on that's on scholarship. So a lot to be determined. But Callie, I'm just kind of curious to get your perspective kind of on, what Jared was saying, and that where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I like the idea, but I hear you guys with the kind of ability to exploit it. It's almost like it'd be best, and I think if they could almost like institute some sort of rule on it, right? So it's like per sport, like if you're getting this amount of playing time, the rule doesn't apply to you. You know what I mean? Like you're playing. You know what I mean? It's like you're doing your thing. Like if you're in the too deep or whatever it looks like, whatever that rule looks like, it's going to have to be sport kind of dependent. But like if you're in the mix and, you're playing, you're all conference, like there's no need for you to transfer. I mean, I get it. Like, circumstances could change, but if you're in the mix, like you're doing your thing, like there's no reason for you to just say, to Jared's point, like, oh, I'm at Murray State, I'm going to jump to Kansas now. I was just, first team all MEAC or whatever league Murray State's in. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of fishy because that's where you get into like, oh, maybe Kansas had a deal like, hey, the numbers don't work out this year. Go to Murray State for a year, ball, and then come as your sophomore year. Things like that. I think that's where it gets dicey. I think the rule, as intended, would be more for kids where it's like, kind of like with my situation I was telling you guys, like you went somewhere, either on a whim, it wasn't really planned out, better kids come ahead of you, you're like not playing or not even on the roster.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, yeah, go make a move. But if you're playing and, everything is presumably good, like then that's where I think that shadiness comes in. And it's like, okay, that could become a bad rule in that case.
And the other side of that coin to me, just as you kind of described it, was, what about the situation where maybe, a kid is at that lower level and then has that desire to want to go play higher, right? Maybe you're in the Mountain West and you want to go to the Pac-12. We look at a smaller scale, but Corbin Sorensen, right? Guy from Portland State, and he pretty much said, he's like, I want to go to the NFL. And that ain't going to happen at Portland State. No disrespect, but, he's realistic with himself. And, here's a guy that, came to Oregon State, and now as a result of the, blanket waiver, he's told us this week he plans to spend this year and next year there. And here's a guy who, from what we've heard, is strongly in the mix for a starting gig coming over from Portland State because of how much he's worked and how he was the best guy on a team like that. So I really think, like you said, there has to be maybe some parameters, just to maybe keep it clean. But for the most part, I think at the end of the day, I think we've all kind of seen what the NCAA has kind of been tone deaf with a little bit is being in the best interest of the kids.
Yeah, exactly. Just being compassionate. Like they lack.
Right.
Yeah,
And when you see, like these kids, right, they see, largely, I don't want to use necessarily the example that the NFL is a lot more player driven than college, but it is. And,
totally.
to an extent of, I was, different sport, but then you look at like the NBA, who's an entirely player, driven league. And I think that's where we see sometimes, these kids know that they want to take their, future in their own hands. And that's where I credit a guy like Corbin Sorensen. You're at Portland State. He took the leap, and, the leap is potentially going to reward him with, a starting spot, at a Power 5 team. So I think overall the rule really stands to benefit the kids. And while there could be some who take advantage of it, I think it's just important, to make sure that the kids are taken care of. And especially right now, you can't, school, not asking is not the right word, but schools are playing amidst this virus. Nothing is 100% safe. You need to look like, you're, have that image and be real. And that's what I trust about Oregon State. Not every school maybe is being real with their kids. Oregon State is. Oregon State's real. And that's what I think is so special about what Jonathan has started to build. So final thoughts from you guys as we kind of start to wrap up this edition of the Edge podcast. Appreciate you coming on, Callie. Jared, anything else you want to touch on, or Callie yourself, anything else you want to tell the subscribers out there or anyone else listening?
No, I mean, I'm just like we talked about, I'm really excited for this year. I think if a couple things break right for us, and like those things are more likely than they've been in previous years. You know what I mean? It's not like we're not hoping for miracles here. I think if a couple things break right for us, we're gonna have a really, really good year. And we need it. 2020 has been rough. So I'm really looking forward to getting the season underway, and thank you guys for your awesome coverage, like keeping us all in the loop. Looking forward to getting those practice reports and hearing about the scrimmage, and then, leading into opening day against Washington State.
Yeah, no doubt. Having people like you on the board makes it a ton of fun for us. I mean, we love all the conversation and just the flow and everything like that. It makes it awesome. So we appreciate you obviously being on there and coming on here. Everybody else listening, and if you're not a subscriber, I would definitely encourage you to do that, because obviously, Brenden, if you look at the front page, we got the fall camp coverage. Lots of it on deck. We got the recruiting coverage on deck. And we'll cover all this NCAA stuff as closely as we can as well. So if you want to be plugged in, there's no better place to be. And hey, maybe you can be the next guest on the podcast, just like Callie.
There you go.
That's true. I'm Jared, great point there. As we definitely been rolling this week. I'm sure you haven't been needing for content so far, Callie. We've definitely kept things quite busy this week, and I love the conversations that we've even had on the damn board this week. Just between the practices every day when we get the parade up there with the videos and whatnot, and there's great discussions coming up amongst the board members every week, and it's kind of getting back to normal. I'm kind of starting to see everyone kind of come back that maybe was posting every now and again when everything was a little slower, but now everyone's like, ooh, Addison Gumbs, Avery Roberts, so this, that, it's football season's around the corner, and Jared and I, we love what we do, getting to cover this team and every different way, and it really is like we've said now that we've invited a bunch of you guys from the board on the pod, it really is like a family at Edge, and we love having the conversations, and as Jared said, you could be the next one on the pod, and could be the next one on the damn board as well. So we definitely want to encourage you to subscribe to beaversedge.com. Again, we got a great promo going right now, and you can start your first 30 days free. Just head on over to beaversedge.com. So with that, I'll go ahead and sign off for Jared Halus and Callie Beebe. This is Managing Editor Brenden Slaughter signing off on this edition of the Edge Podcast. Make sure to keep it tuned to beaversedge.com for all the latest on Oregon State. You don't want to miss it. #1 source for coverage.